My interest in governance and community biased organisations and really what makes them effective started, I suppose, looking back to about 2011 when I was chief exec at Halo, and we were dealing at that time, and some people may remember this, but we were dealing at that time with the impact of the banking crash. And the fact that it took 2 or 3 years from 2008 to find its way into local government. And Halo Leisure in Herefordshire, very rural location, so not many chimney pots. And we had a reasonable sized subsidy at that time. And my concern as the chief exec, working with predominantly my chairman, but also the wider board, was what is the impact of this governance, of this financial crash going to be into local authorities, and what impact might that then have on our organisation? And I had some very, very able people who were able to look at issues around the commercial side of things and programming and so on. But my concern as the chief exec was really around what I suspected might be a problem, in that if the subsidy is removed, because that's the obvious impact, that was then going to drive us down a route where we wouldn't be true to our objects and our values. As a social enterprise, we're working with hard to reach groups. The social responsibility that we had was really, really important. And my concern was that if we were pressed into a real hard commercial fight for our lives, to be honest with you, the things that we held dear and valuable to us might actually be prejudiced. I started to read, and some of the things that I had felt and sensed in my professional life really came to light, came out of the paper when I was reading journals and academic work. And I'm sad to say that well, I'm not sad actually, but it actually I became a bit obsessive about it, and I ended up writing a doctoral thesis on effective governance and social enterprises. So I was taking forward some of the theories and discussing that through research with colleagues who worked in the leisure trust sector. And I found it really, really fascinating. I've had experience as a chairman of a board and working on a board as well. So I've sort of seen it from both sides, from the governance element from the board and also as the chief executive. That's a bit about me. Systems thinking. I'm a big supporter of whole system thinking. I'm not by any means an expert, and I'm sure there are many people in the room today who will know more about that than I do. But whilst it's more complex, to me, it offers a maturity of thought and action which is appropriate for the challenges of modern public services. There's a clear move, I think, across public services to work more collaboratively and to see how we can work together, so that we're addressing the big issues of the day and things, of course, like health inequalities, well-being, climate change, and thinking about governance, how organisations govern, reflecting this collaboration, can be really quite challenging. But I think it's critically important if we're going to resist the drive to protect our own part of the system. So governance, I think, is an important part in that whole wheel. It's a bit like a jigsaw puzzle, and all of the constituent parts that form the jigsaw puzzle have to come together to create the picture that we want to see. And governance is one of those jigsaw pieces. A little bit more about systems thinking. As I say, I feel that we tend to work in a very operationalized way, and that can become habit forming, and I think it's unhealthy, but I understand the reasons why we do that. But the strategic context that we're all working in is uncertain, it's ambiguous, and it's complex. And I think recognizing that from the start is important. And what's really important is the extent to which you and others as leaders can thrive in a world where we see partnership working and a series of interdependencies as being really, really important, rather than competition and our own organisational self-interest. And I think it's natural that we do that. You know, people would say, well, we are paid to do what's right for our organisations, but in terms of systems thinking, that collaboration and a recognition of interdependency is really, really important, because people will typically focus their attention on the parts of the system that they know best, that they're most interested in perhaps, or that are most visible from their own chair. That's just natural and that's human. So seeing the larger system and being able to build a shared understanding of what are complex problems and developing sustainable solutions from that is really, really important. We could do 50 different slides around systems thinking, but those are the things that particularly drew my attention when we're looking at governance. Here's what I found, and here's what I think. Governance, which obviously is linked to leadership, in charitable, social, volunteer, community-biased organisations, governance is a critical competency. But good governance may be less valuable when we compare it to commercial or specialist financial skills. So it can be not forgotten, but it can be less important. And that's particularly true, I think, in good times or in times of stress. I mentioned my experience in Halo, where my concern from a governance perspective, when we had a crisis or an impending crisis, was that we would be driven down the specialist financial commercial skills, and we wouldn't therefore be focusing on what was important to us and our values. So in times of stress, we go to those harder skills, but also in good times. There's something I've come to refer to as comfy slippers. You know, we get into a real comfortable situation when things are going really well. We have a board meeting on a regular basis. We see the same people. We see the same agenda. We have the same generally good information. We look at the same reports. So that can be a problem, I think. And when it goes wrong, and you'll be familiar with some of these examples, boy, does it go wrong. So the Enron scandal, for those who may remember it, was basically about the management team buying electricity, gas in advance, oil, for their own personal benefit. So they were taking their bonuses now, and if it all went wrong, the decisions that they were making all went wrong in 10 years' time, well, they wouldn't be around. They'd be on their yacht in the south of France. Nick Leeson, we know, had so much freedom and was so uncontrolled in Barings Bank that he effectively brought the bank down. So where was the governance there in oversight terms? And I suspect that Carillion may also, the collapse of Carillion may also be largely due to governance or concerns or problems with governance. I won't go through these. I'll just leave them there on the screen for you to have a read through. But as I was doing my study and talking to people, I had a notepad next to me, and I was thinking, well, what are the principles and what are we actually trying to achieve here? And these were some of the things that people said to me, or that struck me particularly as I was going through. And it's good to have an anchor, isn't it? So if we're thinking about what we really believe in terms of governance and what we want, these were some of the things that struck me. There were 6 main theories that I felt underpinned effective governance, and I'll just run through them for you very briefly. So the first is agency theory. And the principle of agency theory is that owners and managers are likely to have different interests. The owners of the company want to see a return on their investment. It's very, very private sector led, this theory. The managers may have different interests to owners. They may want to do what's right for them rather than what's right for the owners and for the organisation. The function of the board within an agency lens is to control managers. It's about close monitoring, compliance, conformance, critical reviews and checks. Are the managers doing what is right for the organisation? That is the main focus of the board. We're going to check and make sure that everything is being done as we want, rather than the potential of the managers doing what's right for them. So that's agency theory. The next theory that I stumbled across was stewardship theory, and this is probably the opposite to agency theory, because it assumes that managers want to do a good job. It assumes that they will act as effective stewards of resources, and that the management and shareholders are seen as partners. You may well be thinking, well, that sounds pretty good, and that's how we work, and hopefully that's the case. So the function of the board with a stewardship lens is primarily strategic, working with senior managers. The board work with senior managers to add value to top level decisions so that they can improve organizational performance. So that's number 2. Number 3 is resource dependency. And you can see the systems link particularly clearly here, because the main focus of resource dependency is that organizations recognize that they are working collaboratively and interdependently with their environment. So that drives great benefits from accessing human or financial capital and the resources of others. The board focus is making those really positive, influential links with other organizations, maintaining good relations, and accessing any knowledge, skills, experience, resources. Really important, I think, theoretical underpinning for systems and good governance. So in the leisure trust world, we would find that maybe directors of public health or directors of the voluntary sector, other community biased leaders would come and join the board of leisure trusts, and vice versa. And that gave us that real depth of experience, skills, knowledge, and also created, hopefully, an advocacy role for the organisation in the wider community. The 4th theory is democratic theory, and as you can see, this is where the board members are a lay or non-professional board, because they're elected. They will represent different interests from different organisations or different sections within the organisation, but they are elected. So the focus of the board is to set overall policy and choose between differing groups. But critically, expertise is not a central requirement. So people are not elected onto a board because they may have a skill or experience in human resources or legal or financial. They are there and elected purely on the basis that they represent the organisation. So the organisation that I work for, GLL, I was saying, it operates in this way. People are elected onto the board irrespective of their skills or knowledge. And that's not to say that they weren't a great board, they were, but it isn't a requirement in order to join the board to have those skills or knowledge. Second to last one is stakeholder theory. And this is where organizations are responding to broader social interests. Again, they're not required to have a particular skill set, but they do represent a range of different groups. So the board is elected on that basis, and school governing bodies are perhaps a good example of this, where you might have a school governing body that has parents, representatives of the LEA, teachers, or indeed the church if it's a church school. So if any of you are school governors or have been school governors, then you might be looking back and saying, okay, right, I can see how that operated now, and that's related back to stakeholder theory. And the final one, and you know, say apologies for the big words in this, that the managerial hegemony, that bit of good old PhD language there. This is where the management team rule the roost. The board no longer effectively controls the organisation. Management absolutely dominant, albeit that they're acting within agreed policies. So this is where, and you may know organisations who operate like this, where the chief executive or the head of service, whoever it is, the head of the paid service rules the roost, and they'll say, okay, right, board, we're going to meet on a monthly basis. Come in, sit down. Here's some paperwork. I'm going to tell you what I think you need to know, and then thank you very much. I'll let you know if I need anything else, and we'll see you in a month's time. So that's managerial hegemony, real strong executive control. Now, starting to then make sense of this a little bit, my view is that when we have a community biased organization that's operating in a whole system approach, whilst they're all important and they all have a place, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute, when you take them individually, they only illuminate one aspect of the board's role. And in reality, it's not an either or. We don't choose agency or managerial hegemony or resource dependency. There are tensions and continually changing circumstances that we're all working within, such that if you take them together, they offer a more realistic view of how boards can work if they are to be successful. So it's not one or the other. We don't allow ourselves to fall into the trap of comfy slippers or crisis management of saying we're only going to follow one of those theories. We need to bring them all into play. And recognizing that there are a number of tensions, and I experienced this when I was a chief executive, and I experience these tensions now as chairman of a board. So when we're looking at all of the different theories and the different behaviours, the first tension is that board members have to act as representatives of a particular group, so stakeholder or democratic, but they're also experts charged with driving performance. So that's quite difficult. If you are not skilled in a certain area, you are there on the board because you are a representative, it will be more difficult for you to drive performance of the organisation. The second tension is between driving that performance, but also ensuring conformance. So, and this can happen between board meetings, it can happen in a board meeting where the board will have to say, part of what we're doing and saying at this particular moment is strategic, stewardship based. We're driving performance. That's the focus, making good decisions, working with management, but also ensuring conformance. So we have to flip and say, how do I know as a board member, how do I know that what you're telling me is important? And how do I know what you're not telling me, which might be important? Some of you may remember the Donald Rumsfeld view, where he used to say there are known knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns. And this probably fits in with the last two. There's a known unknown. I know that there may be something that I don't know, but I don't know what it is. So how do you get that balance between driving performance, but also ensuring conformance? Particularly difficult with a volunteer group, I have found, my own personal view. And then the final tension is between controlling and supporting management. How do you create those bonds so that it is acceptable, understood, recognized, even valued, to recognize that the relationship will be between controlling and supporting management? Now, I felt, my research told me and my experience told me that these tensions are there. They will always be there. Thinking they're not there is naive. It's far better to recognize them and address them, because if you can create what I think are constructive tensions rather than destructive tensions, then you can say, look, we know, the board and the chief exec, we know that there are going to be times when the chief executive is going to have to step up and lead us forward and say, I'm the professional, this is a technical issue, you need to do this, please follow me. And there are times when the chairman or the board will be able to say, sorry, no, we want a bit more information on this. You need to tell us a little bit more. And by recognizing that at the start, everybody feels that they're more comfortable in addressing those tensions. They become constructive tensions when they happen. I was trying to say, well, okay, how do I conceptualize this? And I came up thinking about these theories with a very basic studio mixing desk. So if you have that picture in your mind, and this mixing desk, you're in a recording studio, a very small mixing desk, but it has 6 faders on it. And each of those faders represents one of the theories that we've just been through. So the first thing is you can see that there are 6. Not 7, not 5. You know there are 6, so you know that they're there, and that's the first point. The second point is that you understand what each one does. So knowing that and being then proactive, which I'll come on to in a minute, you are then able to control, to proactively manage the work that you're doing by moving faders up or down, given any of the circumstances that you're focusing. So there may be a time where in the organizations in the year or in the issues that the organization is dealing with, that the board feel they need to push up the agency fader. You know, we need a little bit more on assurance, compliance, making sure that we know what's going on. Equally, there may be times where you say, no, actually, we now need a bit more on the stewardship side. This is now, we're in a much more strategic phase. So down comes the agency fader, up goes the stewardship. Or resource dependency, you might be saying, we need to be thinking about how we really demonstrate our value in an interdependent, collaborative forum or ecosystem. So we need to really push that fader up or down. This is the outcome, really, I suppose, of my thinking on this. Some of this table we've been through. So we've got the 6 theories across the top. The first column across the top, the grey one on theory, just gives an overview of what those theories are. And what I tried to do in this slide then in the composition, focus and dynamics is just to outline what the specific constructs and behaviours of each of the theories might bring when we're thinking about the composition or focus or dynamics. So that's the sense making. It's a recognition of the 6 theories and then overlaying on top of that the how element. So how are we going to govern? The opinion is that leaders can better understand and improve their governance by being more proactive and have an informed set of practices and behaviours that are understood and recognised from the get-go. Everybody, I feel, on the board, I think it's helpful if people on the board understand these behaviours and where they come from at the beginning. But one of the most important words in that sentence is proactive. My research and my own experience suggested to me that governance, particularly the comfy slippers governance, can carry on ad infinitum. And if there isn't a crisis or a challenge or something very significant, then we end up being reactive. It's the same people that talk about the same things on the same frequency. So proactivity is important. The other conclusion that I'd come to was that strategic planning, such as it happens, and there is a lot of really good work that happens around business planning, strategic thinking, is not linked really in any meaningful way to governance. So organizations will be reviewing their strategic plans and their business plans, but do they at the same time and as a part of that process say, we must now also reflect on governance? Let's get that sense-making slide out. Let's get this idea of John's faders out as well. What are we facing? What's good? What's bad? And how should governance be a key element in delivering on that, either managing challenges or seizing opportunities? I felt that that didn't happen. And finally, as hopefully is apparent, I really feel that governance is an important part of that jigsaw that we're looking at, because governance controls everything. Governance will manage crises, governance will set strategies, governance is about delivering on priorities, governance is about culture and all of the things that we value. And if we are looking through a systems lens, really recognizing that we are working with others collaboratively, that this is about an interdependency of organizations, then of course governance has to play a really important part in that.